Hey there, Games Apprentice back with another Evercade video. This week I'm going to be looking at the Worms Collection 1. Pure magic or waste of time? Let's find out. Creator Andy Davidson started development on the game that would become Worms back in 1990, using nothing more than a graphing calculator. When Worms finally arrived in 1995, it was an instant hit thanks to its addictive and highly competitive turn-based artillery action. By the time the War of the Worms escalated to Armageddon in 1999, the series was considered an all-time classic. And 2002's Blast provided an entertaining puzzle-based twist on the formula for a fun challenge of pace. We're excited to finally bring these competitive classics to the Evercade, bring a friend or two and let's go to war. Now personally I had Worms as a kid, and when I tell people that, they always look at me funny, but I don't know why, because it's a great game. Haha, jokes. But I did have Worms. Anyway, here they are ranked from worst to best. Worms should not be last on any collection, but the fact that it is does tell you the quality of this collection. I originally had this back on the PC as Worms United, a collection of the original game and its expansion, and I bloody loved it. If you've never played Worms before, where have you been? In Worms you take control of a 4-worm army to take on another 4-worm army. You can name your army and each of the individual worms, as I've done here where I've got my newest subscribers taking on my chattiest subscribers. You take turns using each of your worms that have a multitude of weapons. You can move one worm and use one weapon on a turn that lasts no more than 30 seconds. Weapons consist of the teleport, which allows you to move anywhere on the map, but instantly end your turn after, allowing you to get a better position, but it could be another 8 worms turns until you get to take advantage of that. You can call in an airstrike, which does good damage over a small area, but it'll only work out in the open and you've only got one. Dynamite does big damage, but you need to be up close to drop it and then get the hell out of there. Again, you only get one of these. Fire Punch and Dragon Punch are low damage punches that can launch your opponent into the sky or knock them further back, allowing you to make use of the surrounding area. The Uzi can be used to make tunnels or as a fairly close range weapon to take on multiple worms. Pretty rubbish, to be honest. The shotgun does a little damage at an unlimited range, and you get 2 shots, but it's really difficult to aim at long distances. Grenades and cluster bombs are both similar. Grenades have a more acute area of damage, whereas cluster bombs spread out. You only get 4 cluster bombs though. Lastly, it's the trusty old bazooka that does big damage, but is heavily affected by the wind. With all the weapons, you've got an aiming cursor, but with the last 3 you've also got a power bar for how far you throw it. Unlike the later games in the series, the original Worms is all about getting really good with the bazooka and the grenades, as they're unlimited. While the later games introduced a lot more manoeuvrability for closer combat and things like homing missiles, the original was all about manually aimed long-range combat, and that's generally how battles tended to end. As you throw a grenade, you'll try and remember where you aimed it, and how much power you put on in comparison to where it landed, for when you turn where the worm comes around again. With bazookas it's a lot more challenging, as you've got to take wind resistance into account, which changes from turn to turn, but there's nothing more satisfying than a perfectly executed long-range bazooka shot, curved beautifully in the wind, none of which you'll see me execute in these videos. I could do them when I was 10 though. The original game might lack the bells and whistles of the later ones, but its gameplay is timeless, so it still holds up incredibly well. It's also a lot easier for newcomers to play, as there's little choice of weapons and they don't have to worry about moving too much. So they're not just going to jump off the end. An absolute classic. I'd never heard of Worms Blast before, and it's the only one of these 3 that I've never owned, as I've never played a spin-off Worms game aside from the excellent Worms Rumble. Originally, I had this one down in last place, but then I played it some more, and there's a really decent game here. It's clearly a PS1 title, so it's let down by the blurry graphics, but the gameplay is good. Buster Move / Puzzle Bobble is the obvious comparison for this one when you look at it, but it's certainly different enough to be its own thing. You control a worm, or a worm's friend, that's in a little boat, and you've got a bazooka with different coloured rockets. Hit the same coloured ball with the same coloured rocket, and you'll get rid of that coloured ball, and all that are touching it. And then anything that's hanging off it will drop. The 2 unique and interesting mechanics that the game works with Firstly, that you don't just fire the bazooka, you fire it like in the Worms games. You've got to put a certain amount of power on it, and it's affected by gravity. The other mechanic is that when anything falls, if you're underneath it, you'll take damage, and you've got a little health bar to the right. This makes for some fun gameplay that Worms Blast further develops through its various game modes. Whilst most games on the Evercade tend to have maybe 2 modes that are like this, the people who made this one clearly had a lot of ideas and rightly weren't expecting a sequel to put them in. The main story mode, I guess, is the puzzle mode. In this one you go through a series of puzzles that have slightly different criteria for you to meet. It's a fun mode for sure. Tournament mode isn't great. This feels like where all the ideas that didn't quite work went. None of the little games here are particularly fun, but it's definitely got a lot of quantity. The best mode for sure is the Versus mode, which contains 3 sub-modes, all of which are a lot of fun. They all involve the same basic concept. You battle against a computer player in the game's main clearing the coloured balls mode. What makes Versus particularly good is that not only can you pick up weapons that affect your opponent's side, but a partition wall in the middle of the screen frequently opens up, allowing you to either shoot your opponent's balls, changing the colour of them, or dropping loads of them, or even curving a bazooka shot right in your opponent's head. But it's a fast-paced game, so doing this will take time away from clearing your own side, so there's definitely a high risk reward here. Worms Blast is a great game that definitely shouldn't be overlooked. Arguably the best Worms game in the series is Worms Armageddon. I mean, it's not. Worms WMD is better, can do crafting, but this is a retro game channel, so yeah, Worms Armageddon is the best in the series because it's old. Whatever your preference though, there's no denying that Worms Armageddon is a brilliant game. Built on the foundations of its predecessors, Armageddon took the series to new heights with its crazier weapons, much improved manoeuvrability and customization. It's a brilliant multiplayer game, especially with 4 people, but even solo it's fun, with its training modes, missions and versus AI matches. All the regular weapons are back from the original, but this time they're joined by a ton more, making a total of up to 48, with the zanier choices such as the banana bomb, the priceless Ming vase, and the sheet, which all cause massive damage. With its new manoeuvrability skills, such as the backwards high jump and the ninja rope, Armageddon becomes less about skilled shots, favouring those who've played the game the most, and more about strategy, as well as really fluky ninja rope skills. The game's customization features go well beyond just naming your worms this time, allowing you to select the tombstone, one of the many amusing and iconic voice dialects, right down to the pitch of your worm's speech. It's all unnecessary, but makes your worms all that more precious to you, making losing one of them in battle all the more painful. Worms Armageddon is as good now as it was 24 years ago. If you don't already have Worms WMD on something, then it's definitely something you should play. Now the main obvious problem with the Worms collection is there's only 3 games on it, 2 of which are basically the same format, so you're probably only going to play Worms or you're only going to play Worms Armageddon. I do think that Worms Blast is a hidden gem though. However, such small variety on a collection and such small quantity is a bit disappointing. However, the quality is very good, so for that reason I am going to score this one a 7 out of 10. As always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like the video and click subscribe so you don't miss out on more Evercade videos, and I'll catch you next time.